Hello, listeners. This is Janine
and Kristen
from Henrico Casa. You are listening to our podcast, Vigilant Voices. Living life every day. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Vigilant Voices, our podcast from Henrico Casa. We use this podcast to shine a light on the real experiences of children and families in our community.
Yes, and we're always happy to have you with us because we know that you, like us, want to know more about the real-life challenges facing children and families so that together we can ensure no child faces continued abuse, neglect, or trauma.
Yes. And in our last episode, we talked about some of the most common issues we see in CASA cases, and we really honed in on two because they're so prevalent, specifically mental health and substance use.
Yep.
Both of these challenges are cited in the majority of our cases. Sometimes they're separate issues, but often they go hand in hand.
Yeah, and either way, they have a big impact on a child's safety and security, and that's in terms of their physical needs, but also other developmental and emotional needs like we talked about.
That's right. And so today we thought we would continue that conversation by talking through a few more challenges that we see for the families and what we see pretty frequently in our cases. And that we're going to focus on three: domestic violence, housing instability, and then just the absence of a parent.
Yeah, and gosh, these are all big issues.
Those are big issues.
They all are. And unfortunately, two very common.
Yes. So when we were looking at our numbers and some of just, again, the prevalence of these issues, 53% of our cases involve domestic violence. 42% were impacted by housing instability.
Yeah.
And in 35% of our cases, a parent was completely absent from a child's life.
Ugh. And that, leads right into the case I wanted to share about today because it involves two of these issues. And so I want you to meet a young girl that I'm going to call Kara. And Kara lived in a single parent household with her mom. Household probably isn't the right word because they didn't have stable housing.
Yeah.
They were kind of known to wander and kind of crash here and there for short periods of time. But, when someone's living in that type of flux, the opportunities start to dwindle. And that's what happened to Kara and her mom. And they did become homeless.
Yeah. And when you think about the daily ins and outs of being homeless as a child, I mean, that is really difficult to imagine and think about. And that level of instability and just constant unknown is stressful for everyone, but especially
for a child. Yeah. And, Kara's mom had been homeschooling her during this time. And listener, you can't see me, but those were air quotes that I just placed around homeschool because there was no actual schooling being done. And so the Department of Social Services and the courts became involved because it was clear that Kara's immediate needs, specifically for shelter and education, but many more, weren't being met.
And that's when CASA was appointed as well.
Yes,
to look
Kara
into it.
Was matched with a CASA advocate, and then she went to live with her grandparents. And there will be more to come at the end of the episode about Kara.
Always leaving us hanging with that cliffhanger. But today, listener, we're going to talk about those three issues that we mentioned: domestic violence, housing instability, and absence of a parent.
Yeah, and Janine, I'm hoping we can talk about these issues like we did last week, not so much explaining like the adult issue, but really focusing on what it looks like to the children, right?
I think that makes good sense. So let's start with domestic violence. So when children live in homes where there's abuse, and that could be physical, emotional, verbal, it just creates an environment of fear and anger.
Yeah, even if a child isn't the direct target of the violence, just witnessing it, right, is deeply traumatic.
Yes, and witnessing it, hearing it, it can impact their brain development, emotional regulation, ability to trust others. I mean, these are kids who are then on high alert all the time, very just sort of hyperactive, constantly watching for the next threat.
Yeah. It's a form of hypervigilance,
Yes.
we call it.
Yes.
And that kind of stress is exhausting. for all of us, right? But specifically exhausting and damaging for a child. The stress can play out, in children's behaviors consciously, but also unconsciously, right? Like they might act out, but they might also revert back to previous stages like bedwetting or sucking a thumb. And that's just this unconscious response is the best way I can explain it, to the fear and the stress that they're living in.
Absolutely. And I think we always have to remember and underscore that, for individuals who are in a violent relationship, leaving that relationship is not simple or easy.
Especially if you think of children being involved as well, right? I know I've seen stats that show that on average it takes someone about 7 times of attempting to leave before they can actually leave an abusive situation. And the studies show that the risk to their safety increases with each attempt to leave.
Yeah. And there are so many reasons why it can be really hard to leave. So there could be financial barriers or reasons, safety concerns, or even custody complications with children.
Yeah.
So part of supporting families means understanding those barriers and helping connect them to the right resources.
Yeah, and part of supporting kids specifically is understanding that their behavior or maybe lack of focus could very well be rooted in a survival response to the violence they're seeing at home, right? We, as safe adults in their life, need to give them time and space to move forward feeling safe and secure and giving them time to open up to their CASA advocate or whoever the other adults are in their life.
Right. So we know that domestic violence clearly impacts and affects child development. And that is also true for one of the other issues we see too often, which is housing instability.
Right.
This could mean a family is moving frequently, living with friends or relatives temporarily, staying in a shelter, or even experiencing, quote unquote, true homelessness by living on the streets.
Yeah. And for kids, that means a ton of disruption.
It could mean changing schools, feeling like you're constantly making, but then losing friends, adjusting to new routines or rules, very little consistency, which can be unsettling and upsetting. And I think it's also hard for parents to then meet their children's needs when they are solely focused on a big need of keeping a roof over their heads.
How stressful, right? And, housing instability often overlaps with other issues and they're all interrelated, but unemployment or untreated mental health concerns, lack of access to childcare. Right. These are the types of things that compound and increase the risk of neglect.
Yeah. And, we see this play out in our CASA cases, but we also saw it play out in a poverty simulation that we facilitated quite recently. The adults in the simulation were so consumed with the day-to-day challenges of living with or through poverty or living without stable housing and just trying to meet those basic needs that the children's needs in the simulation were completely overlooked.
It was so interesting to watch, in a simulation versus the real case.
They missed school. They were skipping school. They were completely left unsupervised. They were not being fed. And so we saw that happen in the simulation, and it always really resonates with us because we see it in real life too.
Yeah. And again, these challenges are then sometimes combined with other issues, right? The one that specifically we see often is the absence of a parent.
Yeah. In 35% of our cases last year, one parent was just completely absent, not present at all.
It's like 1 in 3 kids. That's so sad.
So sad. And sometimes that's due to incarceration, addiction, just straight abandonment or death. But then other times it is just really complicated family dynamics.
Yeah. And, whatever the reason, that absence leaves a void, right?
Absolutely.
Children may feel confused, rejected, angry. And then they may struggle with things like attachment and identity.
Yeah. And when we specifically see what we specifically see a lot, and I mean a lot, is children taking on more responsibility than they should.
Yeah.
They're becoming parentified, as we call it. And what that means is that they are then responsible for taking care of maybe other children in the home or siblings, feeding them, putting them to bed, getting them to school, etc.
Yeah. And we've also seen children taking on more responsibility in terms of their parents, like almost becoming their single parent's emotional support. And in one sense, that can lead to tight bonds, right? But in another sense, it's a type of burden to a little one.
Yeah, and it's an inappropriate relationship at that level, right? So how do we help, right? We have to listen.
Yeah.
As CASA advocates, and listener, right? For you all as caring adults in our community, we really need to try to understand what is really going on. We know that every family is different, and then the reasons behind their challenge are often complicated, but they're unique to them.
Yeah, and clearly Kara's family, from the story I started sharing with you earlier, had their own challenges, right? The more Kara's advocate got to know her and kind of the depth of her story, it became more clear that Kara's mom was struggling with mental illness. And that was really the root of Kara being alone and without housing.
So was the goal for Kara to be returned to mom, or what were we looking at?
Oh, it's so hard because that's what Kara initially wanted, right?
Yeah.
Like every child loves their parent and wants to be with them. She loves her mom. But her mom needed help, and her mom wasn't able to follow through on attending visitation appointments with Kara. And, that's kind of like the first step on the path towards reunification. Yeah. So she missed that opportunity.
And that's really hard and can be heartbreaking because we know it's best.
Yeah.
But not able to.
It's so hard, but I will say the more Kara settled in with her grandparents, the more she got into a routine. And her CASA helped her with each step as she kind of sought more stability and connection in her life within that routine, right? She enrolled in school. She got connected with clubs and some youth activities. She started counseling. And so while she still misses her mom, like clearly she misses her mom, she's doing really well. And she will stay with her grandparents long term. She found the stability that as a child she didn't know she needed with them. And that's great for her.
That's great. And this is a great story to share because in addition to listening, what I heard you say was that the CASA advocate really focused on connecting, which is really, really vital in our cases.
It is. We need to help these families access resources, right? It may be safe housing. It may be counseling or parenting classes. It may be a support group. Whatever. There are so many resources in our community. And at CASA, we love being present with children and their families so that we can kind of play the role of connector, right? We want to make sure they know about these resources and know how to access them.
And in doing so, we can seek out trauma-informed services and supports that prioritize healing and stability, and frankly, help the judges better understand the resources that might be helpful for the family too.
Yeah, that's so true. And, again, listener, what we've learned in our 30 years at CASA and what we hear from our advocates is that helping children often means supporting their parents and their family.
That is 100% true. And to us, that's the key to prevention, right? To preventing abuse and neglect. So our call to action for today is to take a look at the many, many resources in our community, some of which you may not know about, and maybe you'll be surprised by the number and depth of the resources that are available.
For sure. A great way to start is with a resource called 211. So I'm going to link to their site in the show notes.
Yes. And listener, please visit the 211 site. It's really great. It has a wide range of services and resources available for children and families. And it's a great site to know about, to flag if anyone in your life ever needs assistance.
Yeah. And I hope you just walk away from today, listener, remembering that when we lift up families, we create better outcomes for the children in our lives. Thank you for listening to Vigilant Voices, Henrico Casa's new podcast. We have a vision for all children to live in safe, healthy homes. You can help us make that happen. Tell a friend about our podcast and find us on social media.
I believe in the better days.